Welcome back. It has been described as a reckoning from Hollywood to Washington to journalism. Household names, powerful men from Harvey Weinstein to Al Franken, Matt Lauer, gone in an instant. In some cases, years of rumors about predatory behavior, but has a flip switched or a switch flipped? Has behavior tolerated too long in the workplace suddenly become unacceptable everywhere? Not just high-profile men in media and politics, but is it finally unacceptable in your office, your place of business? And joining us for more is Sarah Blackwell of Sarasota Employment Attorney, Rob Thompson of the Revolutionary Act, and Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And Sarah, let me begin with you. Since this all started happening in October with Harvey Weinstein, then going through the Roy Moore contest, Al Franken, Congress, talking about Donald Trump again, has this impacted the number of cases coming across your desk here in Sarasota?
Well, I represent both employers and employees. So employers are really paying attention to their employee handbook, whether they have what they need and whether they have the sexual harassment policy and it's up to date. They're also looking at training and making sure their supervisors and managers are trained. For the employee side, they are becoming braver, I believe, and coming forward and saying things. One thing that is also important for the employer side is people who are disgruntled employees that will just say anything. This is now a hot button that they know that they could scream or shout to get what they want. So employers are being very careful with that as well.
There is a lot to unpack there, as they say. But let me, before we get to that, the whole essence of the Me Too movement is that women should not stay silent anymore and men should not be allowed to continue on with this kind of behavior. So is this a seminal moment? Is it a reckoning, as I suggested, that we have turned a corner where no matter what kind of place of business you're talking about, this behavior will not be tolerated anymore? Rod?
I hope so, but I kind of doubt it. I hope so because I think that we've had the mistreatment between men and women for too many decades now, really. And there's a lot of reason that goes into that, but I think that one problem is that, as old-fashioned as it sounds, as much as I got mocked in the past, I believe that men should treat women with respect, with honor, with dignity, and even in a protective sort of way. The opposite of preying on women, particularly men in power. However, as so many of the general moral rules of society have changed in the last many decades, I think that that becomes more difficult for people to sort of figure where to go and how to do it. I think that all of these examples, from the worst to the least sounding egregious, all cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. I have never, Al Franken, I have never grabbed another woman's rear since I've been married to my wife for 37 years. It just, you don't act that way. A man should not act that way. However, to your point of, do I think it is going to change? There's an awful lot of human nature involved in this situation, and the only way it is if men really feel confined by the culture at large, that there's going to be repercussions if they do, and then maybe so.
That's my next question. Human nature as opposed to fear for your livelihood and your careers. Susan, do you think, or do you have any hopes that either men are learning a lesson, or they are, you roll your eyes, or that it is the concern that you're not going to let happen to you what just happened to Matt Lauer?
Oh, I have to say that it is a watershed moment in the sense that we are talking about it for more than just a 20-minute moment. The positive thing is we are learning and we are educating ourselves, so we start to have a better understanding of what the appropriateness is of a man and a woman acting together in the course of business or even in a personal relationship. Are men concerned? I would imagine they should be, but I think the men who are concerned are the men who would never have done that to begin with and are concerned that they might be seen as inappropriate or held under the same scrutiny. I think the men who behave in that way feel that they're above the law anyway. They're beyond reproach, and in the business situation, it is usually because there isn't anything in place to take care of it.
All right, we are just getting warmed up on this. We'll have much more on the Me Too movement right after we check the First Alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the Me Too movement, sexual harassment, not just in Hollywood or Washington, but at your place of work. And joining us for more are Sarah Blackwell, a Sarasota employment attorney, Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com, and Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report. And Susan, you were talking about the difficulty for men in the workplace who do not do anything wrong. There was an article written by Rod's favorite newspaper, The Washington Post, in which Ann Hewlett, an economist and founder of the Center for Talent Innovation, says that she is concerned about collateral damage of the Me Too movement, in which senior executive men who could put out women at social events, one-on-one dinners, and informal after-work mentoring out of fear that they could say or do something. Before the story about Harvey Weinstein broke, Hewlett's research found that 64% of men were hesitant to do one-on-one meetings with female coworkers because they are fearful of the encounter being misconstrued.
Well, isn't that what Vice President Pence has a rule? That he won't be alone in a room with a woman, and it is a problem because if you leave a woman out of a meeting that you would normally have with a man-to-man, then you are discriminating. And yes, in the same token, I'm sure a lot of men who are concerned, people who pay attention to the rules are concerned about breaking the rules, and there's probably a hesitation, at least right now anyway.
But Rod, you referenced earlier the fact that some men are not going to really get it because this is their behavior, and I guess I'm kind of surprised that within some people, even if it's their behavior and this is what they would do, we have seen so many careers just ended in the last couple of months. And so obviously there is so much to lose. You don't think that's going to have impact on behavior?
I think only short term. I think in the short term, yeah, as long as it's a big deal and it's in the news and you see these big names falling, you're going to see men in power who want to exert that power over women and take advantage of them. You're going to see them kind of hold back and wait and keep a low profile. But as soon as they think it's faded down, if there aren't these cultural constraints, if we don't say this is wrong behavior and there's serious consequences and make that a part of who we are as a people, then I think you'll see them go right back to that behavior again.
You know, there was another article, how the Me Too movement can survive a brewing backlash, in which a woman, Rebecca Traister, told Ezra Klein, there will be a moment where everybody just sort of like, okay, we're not having this conversation anymore. This may be the 5th or 6th show that we've had about sexual harassment in the last 2 months. But Sarah, are you concerned that once we get past this, it's really business as usual?
I mean, I think boys will be boys, like he said. I mean, there are people or men in power that are going to act the way they're going to act, and you have, and different businesses, boys clubs, I think, where they aren't including women, and they are probably acting inappropriate in their boys clubs, and they're already being ostracized. The women are not being included, so this is going to make that even worse. So I think that I'm glad this is coming out. I'm glad people are talking about it, but I think women are still afraid to come forward because other women are hard on them, and because...
In what way?
Other women will say, well, he didn't do that to me, so you must have egged it on somehow, or you must have done something. So they make you feel like you've done something wrong as well. And then also, in addition to that, when someone comes forward and they are still in that work environment, they now have all the eyes looking on them.
And you're in an interesting position because you represent both companies, employers, and women who are filing claims. Right. And so you are seeing from both ends. There are women who unfortunately are trying to take advantage of what's going on nationally right now.
Of course, yes. There are women who are going to use that to their advantage. There are plaintiff people that will, if you got in a car wreck, they're going to grab their neck and say, oh my gosh, I need to go to the hospital. These are the same people in your workforce that if I was your attorney and you as an employer, I would say severance them, get rid of them, and have them sign something saying they'll never sue you, because those type of people will bring claims over anything, no matter what. They also learn how to play the FMLA game where they miss a lot of work. I mean, it's just a different type of person. Like you have the men who are the sexual harassing type of people. You have plaintiffs that are employees that are just going to work the system.
And part of the problem are these non-disclosure agreements, which really kind of on one hand gives either the company or a plaintiff in some cases cover where it's not going to become public, and you in some ways when these situations do become public, you have to in some ways defend yourself against allegations whether they're true or not.
Right. Well, with the non-disclosure or the confidentiality of the settlement agreements, one thing that has gone on in this Me Too movement that I thought was really interesting is a lot of the people who are famous or in the public eye, they're breaking those confidentiality agreements without, without any backlash. I haven't seen any breach of contract claims coming against them. But in the normal setting, the employer wants it to keep rumors from going around that they did anything, but sometimes the employee wants it because they don't want it going to the next employer.
Rod, you said something a little earlier about this is not going to change until societal norms change, but that is a very slow process.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was a slow process in having them get to the point of where they are. It didn't happen overnight where we decided that there was, we were going to live in a society where let's just go with like free sex, where, and sex and love and Woodstock and all. The whole thing that trended where we're just...
Those days were really so free sex.
It was, no, you're right, because it's
Only
not free at all.
World.
Because it's not free at all. And here's the problem, is that in that whole arrangement, and we see it, it is not a surprise to me at all, Alan, that so much of this is centered in Hollywood when you look at what comes out of Hollywood in the relationships between men and women, because it's a dishonest portrayal of a relationship between a man and a woman. And how many times have we seen scenes over the year where the guy is pushing the woman up against the wall and she says, no, 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 and then she finally caves into him? Well, what do people take from that then? What do viewers take from that when, oh, she really did love him, she really did mean yes? Well, that came out of Hollywood. That portrayal, does that happen in real life?
Yeah, actually it does happen in real life, and I wouldn't,
well, then what kind of confusion is that
I
saying?
wouldn't limit it to Hollywood, because when we have a society that has rules and regulations and a system, an economic system set up, the women are always at the disadvantage. It's not just since the 60s. It's been hundreds of years that women have basically been second-class citizens, not just in the workforce, but in the opportunity to actually stand up for themselves. And I want to say that it's not a question of just, oh, great, we're all talking about it right now, but if we don't put the proper procedures in place, if we don't give the right thing to have due process between the accuser and the accused, it's not fair to the accuser to have the whole responsibility put on them, but in the same token, the accused shouldn't have to have it as well.
Why don't you hold that thought, Rod?
Yeah, hold that thought,
Great
Rod.
way to tease the next segment. We'll be back with final thoughts in a moment. And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. And Rod, I think you wanted to respond to Susan.
Well, mostly there's too much there, but mostly I would just say that there's a big, broader swirl of the culture going on here. And so certainly she's right that, you need procedures in place and legal procedures in place. And I would think we have some of that. But one of the big takeaways that I think that we should have from this is that this is a good moment, I think. Whenever you can be revealing what's in the dark and letting the light shine on it that's been going on that's bad, and we see that, we have an opportunity to change things for the better. My concern is that what I heard from a friend the other day, who was a man who said that if it was a man and a woman and they were equal, the man's going to get the nod because he's afraid of what could happen with a woman. And then he told me about another guy who was thinking the same thing. So that's a problem too. So I think the Me Too movement needs to be very careful to not go too far with this, and to make sure that these are always credible, legitimate, and keeping it in tone. And the difference between a dirty joke and rape. It's a big difference. Matt Damon got in trouble for saying that there's a difference.
It is. There is a big
I
difference.
mean, and that's what I wanted to ask you about, is that this has been a hard conversation to have when you look at the allegations against Roy Moore, and then you look at the allegations against Al Franken. Are they the same? And how do you have a conversation about that without being labeled?
Well, you're going to be labeled, and that shouldn't stop you from the conversation. I've been labeled myself, and if I'm going to be afraid of that, then I'm not going to have a good enough chance to actually go up against someone. I think that the key thing that we need to start doing, especially from woman to woman, that when you see something happen, especially if it's not to you, you need to stand up as well.
And Sarah, do you see, when you look at these workplaces right now, are you seeing things change as we speak?
I think more employers are updating their employee handbook to add sexual harassment policy They are doing training for their supervisors and managers. I would also say from an employee's point of view, it's he said, she said, which is a terrible place to be. So you want to document everything. If you get an email, you get a text, if there's phone calls, you want to document as much as you can so it's a lot less he said, she said.
We only have a couple of seconds left, but in the cases that you're familiar with, how often are these things documented in those kinds of ways?
It's rare. It's not often.
And that's the problem.
And that is a huge problem.
And that's
But
where we'll
maybe-
have to leave it.
Maybe we're changing now.
All right. Thanks for joining us. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's expired, just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoasts. And we want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Sarah Blackwell is a Sarasota employment attorney who just put on her jacket because she was cold. Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com and Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report.